All right, everyone, get ready, because today we're going deep, really deep, into the world of convolutional neural networks. CNNs, they're basically computer systems, designed to kind of see like we do. But the big question we're tackling today is, can these systems actually develop something like, human intuition?
That's a great question. And, we've got some really interesting research to dig into today.
Exactly. We're going to be looking at a study by Medha Shekhar and Dobromir Rahnev from Georgia Tech School of Psychology. They did some pretty cool experiments looking at how these CNNs develop confidence in the choices they make, their decisions.
And what they found, some really surprising things about how these systems think, like even when they're not getting any more accurate.
Okay, so before we get too far into it, can you explain this whole idea of stimulus energy? I mean, in a way that even I can wrap my head around.
Okay, so picture this. You're looking at a photo, right? A super clear, high-res photo that's got tons of stimulus energy. It's like you've got a spotlight shining right on the subject, lots of info for your brain to process. But then you've got a blurry, low-res photo that's low stimulus energy, right?
So it's like trying to, read a text in bright sunlight versus a dark room.
Exactly. And in this study, the researchers, they actually played around with the stimulus energy. They did it by changing the clarity of the images the CNNs were working with and how much variation there was.
So they were basically showing them, a bunch of lines?
Yeah.
And asking them to figure out, the average tilt.
Yeah, exactly. They could make the lines super clear and easy to see, or they could make them all fuzzy and hard to make out. And then they change up how much the lines were tilted, so more variation meant more kind of noise for the CNN to deal with.
Okay, I get it. More energy, more information. But here's the really interesting part. They found that the CNNs actually got more confident when there was more stimulus energy, even when they weren't any more likely to get the answer right. How does that even make sense?
It does seem kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it? You'd think, more information, better decisions, but it turns out that's not always how it works.
So it's not just about how much info there is, but about how it gets processed.
Exactly. And one possible explanation for this is what's called it's a mouthful, signal invariance increase hypothesis. So with higher stimulus energy, you're not only getting a stronger signal, like clearer lines in our example, but you're also getting more variability in the information.
Hold on, so more information can actually make things more confusing.
Well, yeah, in a way. Because with more variability, all the evidence the CNN is using, it gets more spread out, and that leads to more extreme judgments. And those extreme judgments, they tend to come with higher confidence, whether they're right or wrong.
Oh, wow, so it's like the CNN is saying, I am positive about this, even if it's just as likely to be wrong.
Exactly. It's a bit of a paradox, but the really interesting thing is that this same hypothesis, they've used it to try to explain how confidence works in humans, too.
Oh, wow. Are you saying that our brains might actually be using similar processes to figure things out and make decisions?
That's what the research suggests, which is pretty wild when you think about it. I mean, it raises some really big questions about what intelligence even is,
I am definitely hooked. Tell me more. What else did they find?
Okay, well, remember how we were talking about changing the clarity of those lines? They did another experiment where they messed with the contrast. But this time, they only changed it for one type of image. And what they found was, strange.
Oh, I got to hear this. Tell me.
They found this pattern in how confident the CNNs were that wouldn't make sense if they were just using what we call a simple positive evidence strategy.
Hold on. What's a positive evidence strategy?
It's basically like you only pay attention to the information that supports what you already think, and you just ignore anything that goes against it. So like if you're trying to figure out if a picture is a cat or a dog, you just focus on the things that look cat-like and ignore the doggy features.
Oh, I see. So the CNNs weren't just looking for things that confirmed what they thought.
Exactly. It's like they were considering more than just the obvious stuff, which is really surprising. I mean, nobody programmed them to do that.
This is where it gets really mind-blowing. It's like they're developing their own way of figuring things out, almost like a person would.
Exactly. And that brings up another really interesting question. Do CNNs process information, think in a completely different way than humans? We'll get into that in a bit.
Yeah, so about whether CNNs think differently than us, turns out they might. In another part of the study, they looked at how people and CNNs did on a color task, deciding if the average color of a bunch of dots was closer to red or blue, and it got kind of weird. A color challenge, huh?
Oh.
Okay, I'm intrigued what happened.
So when the colors got more intense and varied, higher energy, humans actually got less sure of their answers.
Wait, really? That's like the opposite of what happened with those tilted lines.
Yeah.
Why would having more information make us less confident?
Researchers think it might be because of something called robust averaging. It's a mouthful, I know. Basically, when we see tons of info, especially if it's conflicting, our brains tend to kind of downplay the extremes.
So like ignoring the outliers to get a better average.
Exactly. And in this case, more energy meant more extreme color. So maybe we're filtering those out and it makes us less sure. But the CNNs, they didn't seem to do that at all. They just kept getting more and more confident.
So maybe CNNs are missing this whole robust averaging thing that humans have developed.
Could be. Or maybe they just process color differently than our brains. Or they're not picking up on the same patterns. There's still so much we don't know about how these systems work, you know?
Yeah, it's like we're putting together this giant puzzle, but some of the pieces are still missing. We've seen these crazy similarities between how CNNs and people develop confidence, but now we've got this difference too. It's a lot to wrap your head around. What does it all mean?
Well, it tells us that even though CNNs can do some things like humans amazingly well, they don't always get there the same way. And that's really important to remember as we keep developing more and more advanced AI.
Yeah, because if we don't really understand how they work, we can't predict what they'll do.
Oh, exactly. And that's a big deal, especially when we're talking about using AI in, real world situations. Like imagine self-driving cars, medical diagnoses, or even, financial stuff. We need to be sure these systems are reliable.
That's a bit of a scary thought. This deep dive has really made me think about all this stuff.
It is fascinating stuff, and we've only scratched the surface of what this one study found.
So before we wrap things up, let's take a step back and think about the big picture. Why is all this research on CNNs and how confident they are? Why does it even matter?
That's the question, isn't it? Figuring out how these systems work, what they're good at, what they struggle with, how they're like us and how they're different. That's all crucial for the future of AI.
So it's not just about making smarter machines, but about figuring out what smart even means for AI.
Yeah, exactly. If we can understand how CNNs develop something like confidence, maybe we can create AI that's not just accurate, but also, trustworthy, transparent, and ultimately beneficial for everyone.
That's a great goal. It feels like we're at the edge of something huge, but we got to be careful.
I agree. AI has so much potential, but it's up to us to guide it in a way that's ethical, responsible, and aligns with our values.
Well said. This deep dive has been mind-blowing, seriously. We started with lines and dots, and now we're talking about the nature of intelligence. It's wild. What's the thing that stands out most to you from all this research?
Honestly, it's that these CNNs, they came up with these really complex patterns of confidence, but nobody told them to do it. It really shows you how the way we design these systems and how we train them, it makes a huge difference in how they behave, even in ways we might not expect,
That's so true. It's not just about the algorithms themselves. It's the data they're learning from, the goals we give them. So as we create more and more advanced AI, understanding all these little things is going to be super important to make sure they're doing what we want them to.
Absolutely. It's such a cool field, and it's changing so fast.
It really is. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about. We've seen how CNNs learn to be confident, how that's similar to and different from humans. We even got into some of the ethics of AI. What's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this?
If I had to pick one thing, it'd be studying AI isn't just about making machines smarter. It's about understanding intelligence itself. Both human and artificial intelligence.
I love that. That's a perfect way to wrap things up. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into CNNs and confidence.
It's been fun exploring this with you.
And all our listeners out there, we hope this got you thinking about the line between human and artificial intelligence. If CNNs can learn to be confident, what other human-like things could they learn? Could they develop things we think of as uniquely human, like creativity or even consciousness?
Wow, those are some big questions for all of us to consider. The future of AI is full of unknowns, but one thing's for sure, it's going to be amazing.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into CNNs and confidence. Until next time, keep exploring and keep asking those big questions.
And remember, the biggest question might be, what does it really mean to be intelligent?